about that in a moment. Human trafficking awareness in South Carolina is finally bringing the crime into daily conversations on many fronts, shedding light on how we can work together to protect, prevent, and prosecute both sex and labor trafficking here in South Carolina. The impact of the task force and the growth of anti-human trafficking effort in South Carolina is undeniable. In 2024, we are seeing the broader recognition of human trafficking victims and survivors as we look at the numbers from state and federal courts, the National Hotline, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, and DJJ. Our state task force now has a data and research analyst to help us better understand the full scope of human trafficking in South Carolina. First Lady Peggy McMaster, your husband, has one of my favorite quotes. He always says, "You can't properly manage a problem until you measure it." And that is the one reason we hired this. He is very smart. Solicitor, get over here. Come over here in the back. Let Solicitor Stumbo get back there. That's all right. We'll forgive you. Labor and sex trafficking continue to present themselves in varying ways. The most consistent trend we saw in 2024 is the prevalence of minor victims and the continued exploitation of the most vulnerable among us. The trend has ignited the continued push for resources aimed at minors for both prevention and restoration. Given the complexities of human trafficking cases, the South Carolina Human Trafficking Task Force uses a multidisciplinary approach to most strategically utilize the knowledge and strengths of all of its members. Now, the task force is currently comprised of 11 mandated member agencies, 2 NGO organizations, 12 subcommittees, and 11 regional task force, which we will expand to 13 in 2025. Also, the task force now has a listserv of, adjunct supporting membership of over 1,500 people supporting the efforts of the state task force, as well as the regions. In 2024, the state task force supported the launch of the first Judicial Circuit Regional Task Force. Is Sheriff Ravenel here today? I don't know if Sheriff Ravenel are members of the Orangeburg County Sheriff's Office, but I wanted to thank Sheriff Ravenel and his team for their office's leadership in launching this task force. I would like to acknowledge the co-chairs for this task force as well. Orangeburg County Sheriff's Chief of Staff, Chandra McPherson Gibbs. Is she here? I don't know if she's here, but so they're on their way right now. But I want to thank them and the Chief Operating Officer, Labrina Aiken Furtick with Casa Family Systems, Edisto Children's Center. I would also like to acknowledge the new chair of the 10th Judicial Circuit Regional Task Force, Lieutenant Anna Orr with the Oconee County Sheriff's Office. The leadership of these regional task forces make the statewide efforts possible. And I don't know if we had a member from the first, there's Sheriff Ravenel. Thank you, and I wanted to thank your team. We just acknowledged y'all. Also, I believe Solicitor Pasco was 50-50 on whether or not he was going to be here, but I know that the First Circuit Solicitor's Office will be very helpful in that endeavor as well. I want to thank the sheriffs and the solicitors and the agencies and organizations for allowing their employees to commit time to the anti-trafficking efforts in our state. We have several solicitors standing directly behind me. I saw Solicitor Randy Newman, David Stumbo, Solicitor Rick Hubbard, and Solicitor Kevin Brackett. I don't know if I'm missing any other solicitors, but I know that there's several that we're trying to get here. But the leadership of these lead prosecutors in their respective circuits are so important to the success of the task force. The people standing with me today are representatives of all the groups that we just talked about from across the state of South Carolina. Thank you to all the task force members for your hard work and perseverance in 2024. Victims and survivors are not defined by any specific characteristics and represent numerous cultural backgrounds. Therefore, the task force continues to promote the development and implementation of trauma-informed, culturally sensitive, and comprehensive victim-centered approaches to human trafficking. The goal is to provide all stakeholders with the tools and knowledge to best identify and assist victims and survivors. I would now like to invite First Lady Peggy McMaster, who has been such an incredible supporter of this task force. And I would like to also ask the director of the state task force, who represents me on a daily basis, Catherine Moorhead, for a special presentation on behalf of the governor's office. First Lady McMaster. You stand there and look pretty.
I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank our First Lady, Peg McMaster, for ongoing support of anti-human trafficking efforts in South Carolina. I would also like to thank Governor Henry McMaster for proclaiming January Human Trafficking Awareness Month in the state of South Carolina. I'll read just the latter portion. Now therefore, I, Henry Dargan McMaster, Governor of the great state of South Carolina, do hereby proclaim January 2025 as Human Trafficking Awareness Month. Throughout the state, encourage all South Carolinians to recognize the vital role each person has in the prevention of human trafficking, as well as the power of our collective efforts in ending this crime in our communities. Thank you, and thank you once again.
And again, Miss Peggy, I can't thank you enough for every time we do this, you were here. Whenever we have a major event, the First Lady is always here. And one of the things I love, Governor McMaster used to have my job, and he understands firsthand, so he sends his top talent over here to support us. And so understanding how important the work of the Human Trafficking Task Force is, and having you here to elevate and promote its efforts is really important to all of us, and we truly appreciate you, Miss Peggy, and thank you, Catherine. The state task force received substantial funding from the General Assembly in 2022. Because of that funding provided us with much needed staff in 2024, and some of the things we're about to talk about came from the staff that we hired. We were better able, because of this, to identify the lack of appropriate housing and resources for victims and survivors in our state. Last year, on behalf of the entire task force, I requested $12 million from the General Assembly to fund an expansion of community and residential resources in South Carolina. I'll talk about that, why that was important, in just a moment. In fiscal year 25, the task force was appropriated, and that's this past year, $6.5 million to assist in the building and improving minor residential programming through competitive grant processes facilitated by the task force. Every community in South Carolina needs an expansion of both community and residential programming for victims and survivors. Now think about this. About a year and a half ago, we identified from some of the numbers we were provided by SLED that there are over 300 minor victims of human trafficking identified from reports and investigations. At that time, there was only one facility in the state that served as basically a halfway house for minor victims of human trafficking, and those were for only females, and it was only 10 beds in one area of the state. We have over 300 minors. Oftentimes, a minor victim of human trafficking is being victimized by someone within the family, and returning them to the very place that they were victimized is not a good idea. And so that was because of the staff, because of the efforts, we recognized that, and that is why that request was made. And you'll see when I read out this year's numbers, the number of minor victims involved in these cases and reports, it hasn't abated at all. The task force has advocated for legislative changes to address victim rights and further define the crime of sex trafficking. The legislation was finally passed this past year in 2024, and someone who is very important to that process, Senator Katrina Shealy, has been the one constant over the years in sponsoring legislation to advocate on behalf of the citizens of South Carolina on issues identified by the Human Trafficking Task Force. At this time, I would like Senator Katrina Shealy to join me at the podium. The task force recognizes all of the contributions you have made to consistently support the victims and survivors of this state by introducing and passing legislation to strengthen our laws and the rights of our victims. Your steadfast support inspired the creation of an award to be given each year at this press conference for the unique individuals who contribute to the anti-human trafficking movement here in South Carolina. And I'm going to read this. They had it put it in 20-point font so I could read it because I wouldn't be able to read it on this. But the South Carolina Human Trafficking Task Force presents the inaugural Advocate of the Year Award to Katrina Fry Shealy for demonstrating a profound commitment to human trafficking advocacy as a South Carolina senator through steadfast legislative impact. Senator Shealy, I want to present this to you on behalf of the task force, the people of South Carolina, and as your friend, I appreciate all that you have done over the many years in the Senate. Thank you so much. Let's give her a round of applause. Okay, so in 2023, we launched Traffic Proof SC, a series of free age-appropriate educational videos and curricula for middle and high school students. Now, Traffic Proof SC, you're going to hear that throughout this press conference. This was done with the partnership of SCETV. The initiative serves as the first statewide human trafficking prevention education curricula, and it highlights the importance of educating youth and their families on the realities of human trafficking here in South Carolina. In 2024, our curriculum videos were recognized with a Silver Telly Award for excellence in videos and television, a highly recognized award for videos and television in the industry. Also in 2024, the South Carolina Department of Education selected Traffic Proof SC as recommended instructional material for sexual abuse and assault awareness prevention in our public schools. And we're grateful to the leaders, Superintendent Weaver and the leadership at the Department of Education for recognizing that and getting that into the schools. An ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound to cure, so having those educational materials there are so important. The curriculum has been presented to students in South Carolina, and facilitators have been trained across the state, and we have received overwhelming positive responses from those groups. To find out more, please visit the South Carolina Attorney General's website at trafficproofsc.org. You can learn more about that there. In 2024, the Human Trafficking Task Force launched several new statewide initiatives that allowed us to expand outreach and awareness on the horrible crime of human trafficking. The task force launched Travel Watch SC to bring awareness of the National Human Trafficking Hotline through partnerships with transportation and tourism sectors. We initiated a statewide Hispanic outreach awareness campaign, which provided information about human trafficking and the national hotline in both English and Spanish so that we can reach communities that you might not normally be able to speak to. The task force's interfaith subcommittee, along with regional task forces, many represented here today, shared trunk or treat items during the Halloween season, branded with Traffic Proof SC information directed towards our youth so that families and youth could have access to these initiatives and know that these are resources for them. Additionally, we provided over 50,000 personal care items branded with the National Human Trafficking Hotline to homeless and runaway shelters across the state of South Carolina. We have an amazing team that makes these projects happen. You just heard from Catherine Moorhead, who's now in her 9th year. Wow, Catherine, that's amazing. I can't believe it's been 9 years. Who is our director? Along with her, Monique Garvin is the deputy director. Monique is right here, standing next to her husband, Representative Garvin, who's also been an incredible support to us in the General Assembly. Our human trafficking program coordinators are Mandy Bowden, James Massey, Veronica Smith. They are on board to support regional efforts, efforts for task force subcommittees and statewide initiatives, and we couldn't do a lot of this without them. We also have Melanie Williams, who is our training and outreach program assistant, Mark Cardwell, our graphic designer, Ashley Bishop and Blake Easter serve as our 2 prevention education coordinators, and finally, Chris Brunswick serves as our data and research analyst. Remember what I said earlier, the problem is very large and you can't adequately manage a problem until you can successfully measure the problem, and so that's what he'll be working on. The task force is about to bring on board a 4th program coordinator for the PD region. This staff will continue working together to create and support efforts throughout South Carolina to increase awareness and action in every county of the state. For the task force to be effective, we must be able to measure the magnitude of human trafficking in our state. The statistics provided do not represent a comprehensive report on human trafficking in South Carolina. However, we hope that our statistical analysis will bring us closer to obtaining the goal in the years to come. In 2024, the task force used 4 primary sources for data in our report that is being released today. Those 4 sources are the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, state and federal court data, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and the South Carolina Department of Juvenile Justice. They provided statistics as well. First, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. SLED continues to lead efforts in conducting human trafficking investigations on behalf of the governor and the attorney general while providing technical assistance and manpower to other law enforcement agencies. Lieutenant Jade Roy leads the SLED Human Trafficking Unit and chairs the Law Enforcement Subcommittee of the State Task Force. SLED has been a leader in training and providing the lead and support on both state and federal cases throughout South Carolina. In 2024, SLED Human Trafficking Unit responded to, I want to say this slowly, SLED responded to over 285 tips in 40 out of our 46 counties. 285 tips came to SLED on human trafficking in 40 of the 46 counties here in South Carolina. These cases involved 392 potential victims. This is just SLED's data. 392 victims, of which 315 were minors. I understand we only have 15 beds to put those minors at this time in the state until we get a new facility up and running. Chief Keel, I commend you and your team for your dedication to working on these often difficult cases. And personally, I couldn't do my job if I didn't have Mark Keel doing his job. He has been sometimes my right hand and sometimes my left hand in the law enforcement community. And I want to publicly thank you, Chief Keel, for everything that you do and offer you a quick moment to make a brief remark. Chief Keel, where are you? Oh, right behind me. Sorry.
General, I appreciate it again. We all know how devastating and tragic these types of crimes are, especially for our minors. And it is only because we have the continued support of all these folks that stand behind us that we are starting to make a dent in an otherwise just unfathomable amount of crime that's taking place in human trafficking. We have to have continued support of not just law enforcement and prosecutors, but our community partners, our healthcare partners, our educators. It takes everyone to try and make a difference in this particular type crime. We thank the South Carolina Trucking Association, who now has got on board as well 100,000 CDL drivers here in South Carolina that, again, can be more eyes watching for these type crimes. So again, we just want to commit to the people of South Carolina that our continued efforts and hard work, we will not let up, and we will continue to work as hard as we can to prevent these crimes and help these survivors. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I would like to thank our sheriff's offices. Obviously, we have Sheriff Ravenel here today with some members of his team, local law enforcement agencies, and I want to thank you all for all that you do in your respective circuits. Sources of the statistics that we have. 16 defendants with 20 charges of human trafficking were brought in South Carolina State Court. I will repeat that. 16 defendants with 20 charges were brought in South Carolina State Court. Half of the victims were minors, half were adults. As of this report, there are 37 human trafficking defendants with 62 cases pending in South Carolina State Court system. So we have 62 currently pending. The Department of Juvenile Justice, DJJ, identified 64 victims of human trafficking in their system. They identified 64 victims of human trafficking just within their system. The majority are female, and they represent 18 different counties. It is only by screening and identifying those victims that they can receive the much-needed services they so desperately need. And also, before I move on, I do want to say thank you to the men and women in the AG's office. Megan Raymer, Kenley Abey, Heather Weiss, I see them way back there. We have teams that are out there prosecuting these cases in the solicitor's offices with the solicitors, so I do want to thank them for what they do. I would like to thank DJJ Director Eden Hendrick and Human Trafficking Coordinator Robbie Croft for working with the task force and sharing these statistics with us. And I know Robbie Croft is here today. I just spoke to him right there. Thank you. And Director Hendrick could not be here. Our partnership with Polaris, who currently runs the National Human Trafficking Hotline, positions us to gather and release data yearly. So from the third source is the National Hotline, is currently run by Polaris. Here's the data that we got from them. And this comes from 2023. The top 5 counties where there are tips or reports of human trafficking are as follows: Greenville, Horry, Richland, and Charleston and Spartanburg tied for 4th. So those are the top 5 counties. Greenville, Horry, Richland, Charleston, and Spartanburg round out the top 5 counties where there are reports of human trafficking. I do want to say one thing, and when I talk to the folks at the Municipal Association, the Association of Counties, this isn't where the most human trafficking is necessarily occurring. This is just where the most reports of it are coming. There could be counties where there's more human trafficking activity, but because our prevention and/or awareness efforts haven't seeped into that community, it's not being seen and recognized and reported appropriately. So it's like if we took all the highway patrol officers off the public highways, you'd see a drop in speeding tickets. That doesn't mean speeding's not happening. Getting people out there to see and look so that we can prevent it and stop it from occurring is the goal here. So I just want to, those are the top 5 counties where reports are being made. The top 5 sex trafficking venues. These are areas where sex trafficking is predominant. Hotel and motel-based businesses. Pornography, people engaged in the pornographic industry. Escorts, the escort services, or delivery, where someone shows up at your home or your hotel. Illicit massage-based businesses. And then, of course, residence-based businesses, where someone comes to a house and someone is trafficked at that home. The top 5 labor trafficking, we just did sex trafficking. The top 5 labor trafficking venues are retail and small business, housekeeping and cleaning services, hospitality industry is where you see a lot of it, restaurant or food services, and domestic work. And you see a lot, and that is where we see from our reports and the data that we're getting, those are the areas where you're seeing the labor trafficking occur. Now, we are going to continue to aggressively attack these issues that are related to trafficking in South Carolina. I want to thank everyone on the task force, including the law enforcement, prosecutors, healthcare providers, direct service providers, the subcommittees, the regional task force co-chairs, their leadership, their volunteers who work tirelessly all year long. And today they're being recognized, but it's every single day that they are out there in the trenches. And I want to close with this. I've been doing this job now, this week will be 14 years. And when I started back in 2011, there was no press conference, there was no task force, there was no comprehensive state human trafficking law being implemented. There wasn't a comprehensive approach to eradicating human trafficking in South Carolina. South Carolina was ranked one of the worst states in the country for addressing human trafficking as a problem. And I'll be honest with you, when I ran for Attorney General, I never once mentioned the word human trafficking as an issue that I was running on because I didn't know it was a problem until I got in here. And sometimes you don't pick the issues pick you. And in this case, human trafficking picked me and as an advocate, as it did many of the people standing up here with me. This is a scourge in our state. It is real. And I realized it, and now South Carolina is starting to wake up to this. Over the last several years, as I started off in the press conference, people are becoming aware. This is seeping into our consciousness. This isn't a crime that happens in Hollywood movies or in third world countries. It only happens to certain demographics. It can happen to anyone at any time, anywhere. And because of the efforts of this task force, because of the efforts of folks in the General Assembly, when we ask for support, we don't always get as much as we want, but we always get something, and we're always moving the ball forward. And I want to thank the legislators. And by the way, bipartisan, ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing partisan about this. Lots of people from all walks of life with different points of view come together in complete unity to combat human trafficking. So it doesn't matter if you're an elected official, a state agency, federal agency employee, you're a volunteer, you work for a non-governmental organization or a charity or a church group, you are a foot soldier in the war against human trafficking. And so I want to thank everyone. If you're out there and you think you might be a victim of human trafficking, look at this press conference. This is just a drop in the bucket of the Army that's waiting to support you. So this concludes the State Human Trafficking Press Conference. The report is now available online, and we can email it out to you, and I would encourage people to go pick it up and read it. And again, thank you all so much to the members of the media who are also a stakeholder in this effort for reporting on it. So this concludes the press conference. I would encourage you to talk to some of our members here, and I'm pleased to interview some of these folks. Thank you so much. God bless you. Oh, yeah. Well, she's not going anywhere. She's still